Stephen Murphy is the CEO of Virgin, and Stephen's the fortunate guy who has to handle all the big ideas that come from Richard Branson. Prior to joining Virgin, Stephen was a finance expert and worked in a range of consumer businesses, and he's going to share with us today his secrets of being a CEO. Well, morning, Stephen.
Morning.
Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Stephen, there's a range of things we'd like to talk about. Perhaps we could kick off first with we could talk a bit more about the Virgin branded private equity model, because it's clearly not private equity and you're a corporation. Could you just sort of share with us a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, Virgin has a fairly unique history, Steve, as I'm sure people who are in the UK will be well aware of. Founded by an entrepreneur, it was a family business, and so our governance model has evolved into what we think is fundamentally a better combination of the good elements of all models. So we have the kind of formal governance structures that many corporations have, but we have a small centralised board that allows us to make fairly rapid decisions in the same way that private equity businesses do. We have a strong financial discipline. I think we have a well-balanced group of professionals who've sort of been in both worlds and have seen the good and the bad elements of both of them. So we do tend to combine the strong disciplines and rapid decision making of private equity, the use of leverage, the use of external partnerships, the use of external advisors where necessary, with the kind of corporate model, which is, we do think long term and about the brand and the values, and look to be very careful about how we apply those in the businesses we invest in.
Okay. And so sort of a branded private equity model.
Yeah.
How do you go about then driving, I know you look for sort of IRRs of over 30%. How does that happen in practice?
Well, clearly you have to have a great deal of financial discipline, and you have to be prepared to use leverage in the businesses and the use of financial engineering in order to make the equity work hard. Yeah. One big advantage that we have, obviously, is in the use of the brand, and we try to bring the brand to those propositions where we think it's best suited, because that reduces our cost of customer acquisition and our marketing spend. So we're very focused as a marketing organisation on propositions where we're going to use the brand in. Will the brand values be in the product? Will that allow us to reduce the cost of retaining and recruiting and retaining a customer? And will it help us maximise the lifetime value of that customer, which obviously gives us an advantage over, unbranded private equity models where they're going to have to build a business or pay for a brand that we don't have to pay for in the acquisition price.
Right.
So that's typically how we make our equity sweat pretty hard. We're at the upper end of the risk-reward curve. We do a lot of startups, as people will know. That gives us quite a high risk profile, because when you're starting those businesses, it's really a blank sheet of paper, and you're making everything up as you go along. I think it's fair to say that most businesses that we've created, and we've created something like 6 businesses that have been worth over $1 billion, they didn't quite end up where they started off. It's a constant change of process and tuning of the business model all the time in order to take account of the changes in the market, because actually by entering a market you can sometimes have fundamental changes on the nature of the behaviour of customers and on the market. Yeah. And a good example of that is financial services. When we set up Virgin Direct in PEPs back in the 90s, we introduced a very low management charge, which the industry then copied. So that obviously changed the dynamics of the whole market there, and we had to react to that. So sometimes what we do can affect the marketplace that we're actually in.
Yeah, and a lot of the traditional corporates are sort of have a very much a more of a command and control structure with conventional management applied. I'd sense Virgin is very different to that from our conversations. But how do you manage a business that's got, to some degree, a lot of startups, view to the established businesses like Virgin Atlantic, and how do you keep how do you have a more fluid business?
Well, I think you have to run a fundamentally empowered business model. So we are more like activist shareholders than we are managers. So we're establishing businesses which have complete management teams within them. So we're constantly searching for talent to lead those businesses. We're looking at the compositions of the leadership teams to make sure they work and they blend, which is probably the most difficult part now. It's not actually finding the ability to be a CFO, it's finding a CFO who can work with the CEO, who can work within a team, you know, a CEO who's a good leader, a marketing director who is numerate and can work with the CFO. Those kind of team issues are the important ones, but it's fundamentally about finding the right team. That's a constant quest for talent. It's about measuring and monitoring that talent, making sure it's doing what it's supposed to. It's occasionally about changing the composition of teams, you know, because the businesses evolve. They go from fairly hairy startups to quite established businesses, and then ultimately, you know, we're now shareholders in a number of public companies, and that's a different discipline again because of the constraints that the market places on public companies. So it's about you know, being a shareholder, it's about selecting the team, it's about backing them, and it's about making sure that you think you've got the best management at all points in that cycle.
Yeah, and I understand that, you know, from our conversations that you and Richard have a sort of quite a tight fellowship at Virgin that you've had with the business over time. I mean, that must give you a tremendous strength in terms of that experience, but, you know, I suppose the challenge is how do you evolve that over time?
I think, yeah, all the leadership, it's not just me, by the way. I think, you know, the leadership team's been together quite a long time. We're always looking at developing people in the organisation and looking at what the succession might be. And we do have succession planning and all the kind of things that we do. It's a challenge, really, because clearly having a team that's worked together very successfully and that understands the views and perspectives of all of us helps us make decisions quite quickly. But it is a matter of balancing that with a degree of external vigour. You know, we're always looking at the quality of the organisation. Fortunately, I mean, we have a large number of partnerships and joint ventures. That allows us to test ourselves against the market. So when we're talking to major private equity houses, and we do that all over the world, so we have joint ventures in America, in Australia, and in Europe, we're getting a pretty accurate read on whether we think our, you know, the sort of thermometer of management talent, if you like, at the centre. And that's about making sure that you know, you always think you've got the central team is the best team you could have, as well as looking at the teams inside the businesses. Yeah.
In terms of then also being a CEO, and you've been a CEO for a long time, how do you manage to stay grounded and fresh?
Well, I think you've got to like what you do. I mean, I think, you know, I'm very lucky in Virgin in that we have a terrific spread of businesses. So there's always something challenging and exciting going on somewhere. There's always usually something that requires a lot of my attention as well. So, you know, my day is a really exciting one and very challenging. So that's great. For me personally, you know, and obviously we're involved in some businesses which you can feel quite passionate about, and which have a real impact on people, and what we call emotional businesses. You know, things like aviation, people feel quite strongly one way or the other about it. So that's quite involving. It's exciting, and very often it's challenging. And I think the day you get up and you don't really want to go to work is, you know, the day you probably shouldn't go to work. Yeah. Fortunately, it doesn't happen to me.
Right. No. I mean, so actually, it's the passion for the business that keeps you going and moving forward. Yeah. And then when you look at your career, and I'll speak as if it was nearly at the end, which of course it isn't. What about? Are there any sort of one or two magic moments where, you know, that are dear to you?
Yeah, I think we've done some pretty exciting things since I've been at Virgin nearly 15 years, and you know, it was a smaller business. It was just after the music sale, and we were a very small private company at that point. So we've done a huge number of things since then. In particular deals, I was personally responsible for doing the deals, you know, the franchise bids around railways. So that was a big move for us. Yeah. The aviation businesses I've managed for a long time. We're now we've got stakes in 4 airlines in Europe, the UK, Australia, and America. So it's been a terrific globalization of our aviation business. We're continuing to look at, you know, Russia, South America, all those kind of interesting markets. So we've built ourselves a terrific global franchise in that business as investors. Yeah. And so it's